What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Seoulweaver Podcast, Seoulweaver Show. I'm your host, Will Brooks, and as always, I'm coming to you from right smack dab in the middle of Seoul with a brand new episode of the show. Tell you what, you can already tell things are bonkers at the start of this because I'm just way off, man. The timing is off, the delivery is off. I called it the podcast. Well, that might not be that off because I actually did that last week. But I am trying to get things up and running here because I have been reeling against Murphy's Law. If it's Murphy's Law, really? I don't know if it's, I don't know how much went wrong. So much as I missed a day this week because I was off Monday. And instead of kind of jumping ahead and getting ahead of the game like I should have done, I just I chilled, man. It's my last day of leave, my last day of vacation. And I was like, you know what? I'll get to it, man. I'll come around and get things done toward the whenever I get around to it, man. I'll get it done. And it didn't happen. So I found myself here scrambling. And I'm like, okay, cool. I can get the show up and ready by 7. And I got to looking at all the stuff I wanted to talk about, and I was like, man, it's gonna take. Okay, we gotta have to push the show till 8, 8:30, 9:30, and then the wife and kid are here, so I had to put the little one to sleep. And then come back here. Now it is almost 10 o'clock. I'm doing the show and I jump on here and I look at it and I realize I still have it set up the way I did it for my son to film a YouTube video that we've not posted yet. But so it's not even set up. It just hasn't been going the way I had it planned. But we're not going to stop there. We're going to go ahead. We're gonna let that stop us, man. We're gonna go ahead, get the show in, and talk with you guys about some of the things I've been wanting to talk about because the year's changed. Actually, let's start off with that. I hope you guys had a great New Year's Eve. Hope you had a safe New Year's Eve, and you brought in the new year doing what you wanted to do. And I hope you hit the ground running. It's already the end. We're already approaching the end of week 1 of 2018. It went by like that. This whole 2017 as a whole just flew by. Do you remember how many people, how many famous people, how many people we loved and cared about died in 2016? And we were waiting for that year to be over. And we were so happy when 2017 came around. A lot of us, not everybody. But then you can think back to that year that we were happy to see is already over. This year went by faster. I know they say years go by faster as they become a smaller increment of your life. But this one's been a little spooky. In the last few years, time has gone by so fast that I'm like, man, I'm about to die. Eventually you stop experiencing New Year's as they go by. So it's like, dang, just 100 more of these. And I mean, best case scenario, but just what? Let's say I turned 37 this year. So let's say there's another 37 of these. I live to be 84. I don't plan on being that old. But just say I'm exactly halfway through life right now. Man, if it went by as fast as it has so far, it's just gonna speed up. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. In any case, hope you had a great new year. I am looking to change a lot of things with the podcast and a lot of things with the show this year. Because let's be completely honest, the reason I call these Prepisodes is because I'm prepping to get things done or prepping to get, to put things in place in ways that I'm trying to figure out what is the best way to do it. And quite honestly, I don't know what that is. I'm still figuring things out, and that's what this is all for. And I can go ahead and actually get the show happening live, and you guys can kind of watch it happen as we go along. But I want to talk about the things that I've been mulling over in my mind for the show, for the podcast today, and kind of share that with you guys and see what you think. And I mean, this is not that people often watch live anyway, but this is live and you can kind of check it out, or you can rewatch this and let me know your opinions. In fact, one of the things I'm going to do is make it a little more easy to consume, because my videos are long since I do them all live and I kind of throw everything in back to back. We'll talk about that in just a few. But let me just get this set up and kind of get things straight. We got a lot of news to cover today, and that's really another reason why the show took so long to get up and running. because there's just so much news after this announcement in North Korea. I'm going to get to that in the second half of the show. So much that I don't think I'm going to even make it to the social media information, the social media posts, and current events or upcoming events, because it's just so much to share and so much going on that it's going to dominate like the news cycle or whatever. The current events aspect of the show is going to be dominating the whole thing. Oh, good morning from Florida. 33 degrees in Florida. I've been reading about Florida having like this cold snap that they're going through right now. What are they calling it? A cold cyclone bomb or something like that? That doesn't sound like it's going to be anything fun in my experience. Places that don't usually get cold weather often almost shut down when they finally do get cold weather because they're just not used to dealing with it. So good luck to you out there. Bundle up. You might have some. Hopefully you got some warm clothes from somewhere that you happen to pick up. Somebody gave it to you or something like that. Give me one brief minute. I'm getting my slides together, even though they aren't relevant to what I'm about to do here, but trying to get things organized since I had to reorganize things. What I really did, actually, I can just go to the notes I have on the show. So, here's what's going on. The show is a test ground to kind of figure out how I want to present data or present information to you guys. I want to share information about life in Korea, and I want to do so via the podcast, via the current event show, and via the current event segment, and via the social media and upcoming event segment. So I'm talking about different news articles and things like that report what's been happening in Korea, and then I go into some social media posts that caught my attention either on Facebook or Twitter. And then I jump into the upcoming events for the weekend, so to kind of let you guys know what's going on out there, and even find out for myself what's going on out there, because this is all information that I'm looking up to share with you guys on social media as it is, and it'd be nice to share it. One part of the podcast, one important part of the podcast, is the interview segment, and I've been letting you guys know that I'm going to get around to knocking that out and making that a bigger part of the podcast segment of the show, because I really want you guys to get opinions of other people around there, other expats here in Korea, because they really do have a holistic opinion or a holistic view of life in Korea, more so than I have. And I've gone into detail about why I think my opinion in Korea or my experience in Korea is limited, and I don't consider myself a real expat because I'm over here affiliated with the military and have access to a lot of things they don't have access to, and there's a lot of things they experience that I never have to experience because of this kind of hybrid status that I have over here. So I want to get those guys in here who just picked up their toys, came over here to Korea, and want to talk about it, and just start living over here, started living in the community over here, started working on the economy and working in the Korean community, working for a Korean boss with Korean coworkers, and I don't know, buying meat in a Korean butcher shop and things like that. So that's going to be a big part of the podcast. I'm setting that up. But the current format of the show, the way it's been recently, is I jump on Tuesday evening around 7:30 Korea time, and I just do the segments straight through. I do the podcast, I do the current event show, and I do the social media and upcoming events segment. And sometimes that amounts to a 2-hour show. And so I get cats like texting me on Kakao and hitting me up, and they're like, "Hey man, looked like that was a good show this weekend, but it was 2 hours. I couldn't watch the whole thing." And I'm like, I get it. Yeah, because even I mean, that's a good point. Like, I can't say that I'm so interesting that I can hold someone's attention for 2 hours, especially in an environment where like things are happening. People have a shorter attention span in YouTube. People are just jumping through videos and binge watching videos. So the plan was always to go in and chop, like just record the whole thing and then chop like those different bits and pieces of like different topics that I talked about, chop those up into their own individual videos, and then repost those on YouTube and share those with you and edit them and things like that. That hasn't been happening. I think I've literally done that twice. I can count on 2 fingers how many times that's happened. And I mean, it's a great. I think it's a good platform. I think it's an effective way to do the show, because that way I can just get it all done and then edit it whenever I get time. The thing is, I've done a very, very bad job of making time to do that, and so I'm looking at two different ways of resolving this. Still do the show live, because I can actually, sit down and get the house empty usually on a Thursday evening, and I can get my buddy who joined me last week to kind of come down, and we can just go through and walk through the show. I got a little co-host coming up, or a bigger than me co-host, but I got a co-host of mine that is kind of jumping in and having fun doing the show and things like that, and we can just talk about it all the way through. And then instead of actually posting the live video, I'll just go through and chop it up. So you have the show being done live, but then you'll have me like having little segments in between where I kind of end a video, go and take a break, and show you the break menu or show you the break screen, and then come back and I'll go back and edit that out and make probably 6 different videos out of it, because I want to keep the actual videos down to like 15 minutes a piece. Or since I am doing a current event segment, I might take that current event segment out, because I'm a little worried about doing a current event segment on a Thursday that might not completely post until Sunday, and then Friday, Saturday, you've had things happen that I'm just not covering in the show that are actually pretty relevant to other things that I cover in the show. So I kind of want to keep that current event segment as live or as close to live as possible. So I am struggling with how to handle things, because quite honestly, I don't have a lot of time to record unless I record like this late at night when everybody's asleep. But then I'm like dipping into my own sleep time, and I'm going to be groggy and messed up when I get up in the morning. So I'm trying to get things figured out and see what's best, how it's best to kind of, get these 3 segments. I actually like doing these 3 segments. So I want to figure out what's the best way to go about getting these 3 segments recorded and set up for you guys. I want to do it live because I want to have people eventually come in and kind of hit me with questions about what I'm talking about. But even though there's a huge delay in what I'm saying and what's showing on the chat and YouTube, but I want to get all that stuff kind of lined up. And so I'm going to be doing a lot of testing over the next few weeks to figure out what's the best way to do it, and what's the best way that I can sustain to be consistent, because I was consistent for a little while, but it kind of got off. I went on vacation. And then what's the best way I can do it to present it to you guys, so that all the videos aren't like these 45-minute videos or anything like that, or just like these small segmented videos where you can watch it, and if you got 10-15 minutes, you can go ahead and watch it and then come back and check out the other one whenever you have time. I want to be more respectful of you guys' time, so I'm trying to figure things out like that. But the general feel of the show is still going to be the same. Like, it's still going to be me kind of going over these topics and or going over topics that caught my attention over the week or the last few days, and then sharing with you and giving you my brief opinion on what they are, and kind of leaving it at that. So there we have it. I think that's all I really wanted to cover. And then I want to further develop the social media and upcoming events portion, because quite honestly, I mention this every time I do the show, but like every time I get down to a social media post, it's almost like an extended version of the current event segment, because so many social media posts are like just shared articles, and you jump into it, and I feel like I'm just doing another current event segment of stuff I saw on social media instead of in the actual website of those online magazines and online newspapers. So we're gonna figure something else out with that, because I really want to provide value with those social media posts. When I came up with that idea, there were really, really interesting and intriguing posts in a lot of the Facebook groups that I saw, and that's what made me come up with it, because it would trigger a lot of discussion in the comments, and I would have so many things to say, but I'd find myself writing like basically a blog post in the comment section of a Facebook group, and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna do this on video, like just respond to it and share it and then just talk about it a little bit. And then, like, I swear, the moment I made the decision to do that, those posts, they became 50% less than what I was seeing before. Maybe my Facebook algorithm changed or something like that. I'm just not seeing them, so I have to go out there and find them. And if I'm not playing the show, well, then that doesn't happen. So that will, again, that's what that is supposed to be. I'll further develop that and get people to kind of ping me and get people out there to keep an eye out for social media posts that are interesting and explain or kind of depict interesting situations about life here in Korea and share those with you. The same with upcoming events. My wife is really getting to the point where she wants to kind of join in and help and share about upcoming events and things that she finds interesting in Korea and share that with you guys, because sometimes it's a little harder because since she's Korean, sometimes she just doesn't feel like things are interesting just because she's used to seeing them all the time. That's a real frustrating process right there. It's like everybody knows that you can take the KTX train to not everybody. Let's share some of this information. So you'll hopefully see the missus popping up on here from time to time, talking about things that she thinks is interesting. So that's just a quick update on what's going on with the show. So the show itself, I still want to make it live. I still want to do it live, so that way when people have time, they can, if they're bored, they can chime in, they can jump in and see what's going on and what we're talking about. But instead of just having it post to Facebook, having it just post to YouTube, I'm going to go in, edit it, and then put it up, and then we'll see where it goes from there. So with that being said, let's jump into a lot of news today. Man, it's been so much going on this week, and it all kind of stems from this single event. I don't know, and I'm going to try to lay this out in a reasonable order, but there's no guarantee that I'm going to really do that. It's in the best order that I could think of, and it all starts with a Donald Trump tweet, and as so many things do these days. But it starts with this Donald Trump tweet, and it's Donald Trump saying North Korean leader Kim Jong-un just stated that the nuclear button is on his desk at all times. Will someone from his depleted and food-starved regime please inform him that I too have a nuclear button, but it is much bigger and more powerful one than his, and my button works. So Donald Trump said this in response to Kim Jong-un saying that it's something that he said, something that Kim Jong-un said. It's something that Kim Jong-un said in his New Year's address to North Korea and neighboring countries and things along those lines. And this is something that Kim Jong-un said. But the reason I put this here right now is because this quote or this tweet, David Frum was on The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell, and he was telling him that David Frum actually said in that segment, David Frum is he a Democratic pundit? He's a pundit on MSNBC, and he says this is the big story in Asia right now. And the reason I put that up front here tonight is because sometimes there's such an interesting difference between what you see being reported in America and what you see being reported in South Korea when it comes to the Korean conflict. David Frum is incorrect from what I've seen, and I've been looking through, and he's one of the reasons that I took a little bit longer. In this statement, he's incorrect. Just this specific statement right here. Donald Trump's tweet, it's not featured in any of the articles I'm going to talk about, any of the articles I'm going to share tonight, and these were all the top articles from news in Korea in the last 2 days. So no, this is not the number one story. Donald Trump's tweet is not the number one story in Asia. You're going to find out what is the number one story, and it's related to what Donald Trump tweeted out, but it's not. No one's even mentioned his tweet, and I'm sure people have, but in 2 hours of diving through this whole North Korean, South Korean, like trying to get an update on what has happened over the past week that was triggered by Kim Jong-un's address, none of it talks about his tweet. Nothing that I saw. So, and you'll see, I went over quite a few articles, and so let's jump into those really quick. One thing David Frum did say that was important, and I actually found this on Twitter when I was going through and trying to do social media things, is that, oh God, I can't see it. And if I change it, you won't be able to see it. Let me scoot for a second. So, but he says, Trump's bellicose, impotent. I can't read that. Hold on, let me zoom in. See if I can read that. I can't zoom in. If I make it bigger, it's just gonna it's gonna get off the screen. Yeah, we're just gonna do it this way. This is why it's so fun to do live video. Trump's bellicose, imprudent tweets are convincing the world and South Korea that the United States is an unreliable ally. Is an unreliable ally. That's what David Frum is saying, and that's a point that he made while he was on the last word, or not the last word. I forgot the name of Chris O'Donnell's show, or Lawrence O'Donnell's show, but that's the point he was making on that show. That's another point that he made that I agree with. That if Trump's gonna sit there and constantly say, "Hey, China can fix the problem," and I'm gonna be a little erratic when I say things or when I comment about these things, then at some point in time, the people in the region are gonna start looking to China to fix the problem. So that's something that I don't think we want. That's something that I don't think it doesn't feed Western interests. If Western interests are what they have been for the past 70 years, unless they've completely changed. But here's what's being reported in Korea, and these are a lot of articles. There's a lot to unpack here, and a lot going on. But in addition to saying that the nuclear button is always on his desk, Kim Jong-un, in his 2018 address, also said that he'd be willing to send delegation to Pyeongchang for the Olympics here in South Korea. And that's a big deal because South Korea has been asking North Korea to participate in the Olympics, and North Korea really hasn't been saying anything. They haven't been responding. And so Kim Jong-un kind of coming out here and saying that, hey, I'll be willing to participate in the Olympics. We're going to send delegation. It just sent South Korea in a frenzy to kind of go ahead and make that happen before something changes, because everything's changing so quickly. And so they reopened, you see the two Koreas reopened hotline is one of the bottom headlines here. They reopened the hotline that South Korea and North Korea use to communicate, because it's a big deal because it's been closed for 2 years, ever since Kaesong. We talked about it last week. Ever since Kaesong closed, they closed those lines of communication. So South Korea and North Korea, and I've brought this up over and over and over again, but South Korea and North Korea have not been in direct contact or direct communication for 2 years. And that's been the big deal. And that's been the reason that, we all say like, oh, this, South Korea and North Korea, they'll never go to war. But it's been the reason that we've been saying that. A lot of expats in Korea have been saying that and kind of keeping an eye on it, because that communication hadn't been closed like that for a long time. So for the first time in 70 years, South Korea and North Korea hadn't been talking. Maybe not 70 years, but for the first time in 50 years, South Korea and North Korea were not communicating at all. They had closed down Kaesong province. That was the joint economic venture that the two countries had together. And then they had canceled all the meetings of separated families that are separated because of the Korean War. Usually, like, they have family reunions, or they were arranging family reunions, so families that have been separated by it all this time can finally go meet each other and meet somewhere in between North and South Korea. And I think you had tours into North Korea before all this happened and things like that. So the relations were a lot more warm than they have been over the past couple of years. So this is a big deal. And South Korean foreign ministers and South Korea's government leapt into action as soon as they saw that Kim Jong-un was willing to kind of start having a two-way conversation now. And it's a good news story, but it was kind of like, hey, don't look too anxious for it. Like, South Korea almost seemed overly anxious, and we've talked about the reason that South Korea's government, the current administration, is they're kind of a sunshine policy-esque administration. So they want to see positive relations. They want to see relationships with North Korea increase and become better and move toward peaceful unification. The thing is, though, as noted, Kim Jong-un also, while he extended an olive branch to South Korea, he kind of threw the elbow at, threw a little shade towards Donald Trump in America. So people were pretty pumped up to hear that, the two countries would be talking again. But as you can see there at the bottom notice, the USFK chief, the United States Forces of Korea, he warned against like illusions of grandeur about, how North Korea is this, how peaceful, or what does this really mean from North Korea? Are they really genuinely looking for peace after spending the last year at this developing nuclear weapons at breakneck speed? So I mean, and that's a good point. Like, should we be let's not be overly anxious to go ahead and get this two-way conversation going, but let's not keep our eye on the prize and make sure that he doesn't drive a wedge between the Korean-U.S. alliance. And that's kind of what people are worried about in this. So when I say like Trump's tweet is not the big news here in Korea, it's not. The fact this right here, two Koreas reopened the hotline to communicate with one another, that's the big news in Korea. And I don't think anything is going above that. That is the biggest news that's happening, at least in this week's news cycle. So nobody's even thinking about Trump in that regard. Now, when you get further down the line, people do think about the South Korean and U.S. alliance, and concern is arising over discord between the allies as two Koreas begin to talk. So people are a little worried that, Trump and Moon Jae-in have been at odds a little bit. I mean, they have two different ideologies and two different policies. Trump is a conservative Republican president. Moon Jae-in is a progressive and liberal president. And for the most part, they really haven't had warm relations. It seems that and it doesn't help that President Trump seems to be closer to Abe of Japan, the Prime Minister of Japan. More so than Moon Jae-in. And this is the thing with Trump. I mean, I think once Trump hears that Moon Jae-in is progressive or liberal left, then he kind of shuts down automatically anyway and says, okay, well, we're not the same party. We're not on the same team. But the countries are allies. So let's see what we can do and work together. And so there's a few things that have caused friction between Moon and Trump. One has been the notion that America is within its rights to do a preemptive strike on North Korea to stop them from developing nuclear weapons, and that's Trump's position. And then Moon's position is he has veto rights over over America doing just that, trying to execute a preemptive strike. So that's caused a little bit of ruckus, and Moon has talked about delaying the exercises here in South Korea and trying to appease North Korea, so as long as North Korea doesn't launch any more nuclear missiles. And the annual exercises here in South Korea have taken place twice a year, every year, maybe 3 times a year, every year. So some exercises that I'm not even aware of, but they've taken place here in Korea nonstop over and over again. And again, I've made this claim over and over again that North Korea always says they're offensive in nature and they're defensive in nature. They've been happening for 50, 60 years. If they were planning to invade for 60 years and they didn't do it, you really had nothing to worry about. Because there's more problems on their end than on your end. And so it's pretty interesting to see what's going on here. And I think people are making a bigger deal out of it than what it seems. I'll get into that in just a minute. But the suggestion is what I just explained is Kim Jong-un is artfully using the situation I just explained to drive a wedge between Seoul and Washington. And you're seeing a lot of people report on that. But here's something that I thought was interesting. Foreign Minister of Korea reaffirms that inter-Korean dialogue won't go separately from denuclearization efforts. So they're saying that us talking to Korea is not going to adversely affect, and we're not going to talk to them separate from and not try to disarm their nuclear program. Like all that's going to be included in the two-way talks. And how? That's my question. Like, how is that going to happen? I don't see it. What are you going to tell North Korea? Are you going to tell North Korea, hey, you can come to the Olympics, but you got to give up your nukes? No, I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think the development of this the development of the nukes is what has convinced Kim Jong-un, it's part of Kim Jong-un's rationalization. It's why he's like, okay, we can talk now, because he feels like he has a bigger bargaining chip than he's ever had since he's been in charge, since he took power in North Korea. And to be completely, yeah, of course he does. And so I think if it comes down to South Korea saying you can come to the Olympics, but you got to work with us on these nukes, North Korea will opt out of the Olympics and they'll just go on developing their program. And there's also reports that North Korea is kind of feeling the bite and the squeeze of the sanctions that the UN has put on North Korea. So maybe he's posturing that he's got a position of power because he has nuclear weapons, but he really is weakened because these sanctions have put a real damper on his party over there, because I'm sure at some point in time it affects even his lifestyle. So I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm curious to see what's going to happen here. I'm happy to see that the communication's open. A little nervous to see, or a little uncomfortable seeing South Korea kind of slide over and try to play this. I don't know if they're playing like this two-way game of trying to have their cake and eat it. Not really have their cake and eat it too. I mean, South Korea doesn't want to go to war with their brothers to the north, so they're trying to find a way to artfully play this to resolve the whole issue, because things have really been ratcheting up over the last year or the last 2 years, to be completely honest. And up until now, there has been no sign of North Korea participating in ratcheting down. Or has there? Because to be completely honest, I think about 6, maybe 8 weeks ago in one of these episodes, we talked about how North Korea was looking to develop create a back channel with Trump because they really couldn't understand what he was saying. They really didn't know how to take what he was saying. So there's a couple of different things that there's that. And then last week we talked a little bit about the U.S. no longer being a little bit more discreet with the exercises that they're doing, and they're going to let South Korea inform North Korea of the exercises instead of just going out and putting it out publicly. And I was like, my question last week was, how are they going to do that? Because North Korea and South Korea don't talk. So I'm thinking maybe back then, the U.S. was a little bit aware of what's taking place right now. And maybe those back channels did get developed. Maybe those back channels did get established, and there has been backdoor communication between the three. And this is how they are going about doing it publicly. Because Kim Jong-un seems to save a little bit of face. Moon Jae-in seems to benefit from it. And if Donald Trump plays his cards right, then the U.S. benefits from it as well. I don't know. Maybe I'm looking at things through rose-colored glasses, but it's been pretty crazy. And then so you get through all that, and you're like, okay, well, we got to be a little careful, but at least they're talking, and well, maybe something can come from this. And then you get this, and even though North Korea is, on one hand, North Korea is calling the hotline establishment a diplomatic breakthrough, which is crazy. That's like somebody saying, I'm not going to talk to you. And then when they they ignore you for a couple of years, and then finally when they say, okay, I'm ready to listen to you now, then they call it a diplomatic breakthrough. Like, it's such a breakthrough because I've decided to listen to you now. Okay, whatever. Tell yourselves whatever you got to tell yourselves. But there's also a report that North Korea is preparing for another missile launch. And this report was actually, I think it was reported to CBS. And CBS basically, there was a report written saying that there's activity going on in the same site that North Korea tested their last missile. And so they're worried that it looks like they're preparing for another missile test. And, they actually mentioned this when Kim Jong-un said that he has the nuclear button on his desk. They're saying, well, technically, Kim Jong-un has to do a lot to launch a nuclear missile. So just having it on his desk doesn't mean that he can't press it and launch it at the U.S. right now. No, he's got to get things done. And what they're seeing is what it takes to get a missile prepped, because they're still using liquid fuel and blase. So they're seeing some action around that area, and they're wondering if he's going to launch a missile within the next couple of weeks. And so South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff are saying that they're dismissing the idea. No, they're not going to launch a missile in the next couple of weeks. We'll see about that. I don't think North Korea really. You haven't been talking to them until like yesterday. How do you know? Like, they could launch another missile, and then nobody's going to stop them. So why are you saying that? That's out of the question. That doesn't sound right. But they did mention that they did also throw in a caveat that Kim Jong-un can decide to launch it at any time. So really, we don't know. But Another important thing before I move on from North Korea is Kim Jong-un also said in this yearly address or New Year's address that he's going to be pursuing the mass production of nuclear arms, and that's something that actually sent a chill down my spine. And it's kind of weird that that's not a headline that's been sticking out as like one of the big headlines. I mean, people have reported it, but it's not one of the big ones. So that's it on the North Korean update. So I'm going to go ahead and take a quick break, get things set up for part 2 of the current events segment. Come back and join me in just a moment. I will be back with a little bit more news that is not North Korea related. Still a little tough, some of it's a little serious, but it kind of lightens up toward the end. Well, that's it, because last week it got a little rough. I'm not sure. We'll see. I'll be back with part 2 of the show in just a moment. Stay tuned. So, real talk, it is late and your boy got work tomorrow, so we have got to run through these things fairly quickly. I'm just gonna cover. I just got 3 stories to cover. I thought I had a few more. I'm actually I've been a little confused about what all I got going, and why did this just do this? Probably should have stayed on break. Oh no, it's this one. There you go. So we're back with part 2 of the current events segment. Just wanted to touch on, if you happened not to catch this, you're watching a replay. We just did a full segment on North Korean update. An update on North Korean and South Korean relations and how that affects the U.S. XYZ. Go ahead and watch that. The link will be in the description, as well as I'll put one of the things one of the cards right here. So there. So we're here to talk we're back with part 2 of the segment, and I want to talk a little bit about other news that's been happening here in Korea. This one is actually, it's very, okay, first of all, it's very sad. It doesn't seem sad. Someone attempted to commit suicide at Incheon Airport, and it seems like I just walked through this airport because I just got back to Korea, so it's almost like I missed it, but not. If I had gone X amount of days later, this would have happened while I was at the airport, and so that's why it's caught my attention. Like, wow, I was just there. It's crazy when you see something. It's a suicide attempt by an American man who was undergoing bipolar. He was, I guess, kind of transitioning out into his bipolar state. Like, I guess he was on his meds, and maybe he ran out while he was overseas, and he was in Thailand taking I think it's Shanghai Airlines. And he was coming from Thailand with a stop in Korea, and he was flying back home to the U.S. But he went off his meds, and he was having he's at the onset of an episode, and I guess it started to happen on the plane from Thailand. And he actually, the people on Singapore Airlines were able to kind of calm him down, but he eventually, they got him calmed down, they got him off the plane, and then they told the airport, Incheon Airport, like, hey, there's something going on with this guy, so he needs a little bit of help. And the airport's like, okay, we'll get somebody over there. We'll give him a room to stay in the overnight, I guess, section. I don't know. They must have a hotel there at the airport, and then we'll have somebody keep an eye on him. But they can't really. The airport was saying they can't really designate somebody to watch him 24/7, and they didn't. And so what happened was, when somebody wasn't watching him, he walked to the 4th floor of Incheon Airport, and he jumped from the 4th floor to the 3rd floor. So he's in critical condition. He didn't die. But it looks like the families might be trying to, they haven't actually, they haven't sued Shanghai Air or Incheon Airport. Not Shanghai Air. I got to find out which airline that is. But they haven't sued the airline, but they are trying to, they are saying that the airline is at fault, at least somewhat, because they should have been, they knew he was having an episode and they should have been watching him, or they should have contacted some professionals to come and actually evaluate him and see where his mental state was. Yeah, maybe, but it's like the airport says, they can't watch everybody the whole time. So I'm not sure how you go about litigating that. Hopefully he's all right and he recovers. It brings up an interesting point, and another reason I brought this up is that I talked about people having mental illness while they're overseas or while they're traveling overseas before. Like it's really tough if you struggle with depression, or if you're on medication and you're traveling over here and you don't bring the right amount, or you somehow lose access to some of the meds or something like that. You lose them, or they get taken from you. I don't know, you lose your luggage or something like that, and you go off your meds and you need them to stay in a normal, or a regular state, mental state. It's a big deal if you're overseas. And we've seen expats over here in Korea actually lose access. It's Singapore Airlines, not Shanghai Airlines. But we've seen expats over here lose access to their meds and have some real struggles with trying to either reacquire them or get home before something happens, or before tragedy strikes. So that's exactly what happened with this guy. So I bring this up because people should definitely keep this in mind. It's a big deal, especially for you and your family, particularly for you and your family, because this might not be news tomorrow for us, but for this guy and his family, they'll be forever affected by it. But speaking of health, there's actually this is a good news story, and I should end with this one, and I am gonna start with something. So this is a sensitive topic. Xenophobia dies hard in Korea, survey shows. So there's a survey done. The article talks about a survey that was done. I think it was only on 800 and something like that people, but they got a survey group, and they conducted a survey, and basically asking people what they thought about foreigners who come over here to work. And these are foreigners that come over to work in hard to fill jobs, and kind of like the DD&D jobs and things like that. And a lot of people from other parts of Asia, and I guess the biggest group is Korean nationals from China, Chinese nationals of Korean origin. And they were just asking other workers how they felt about these guys. Do you consider them Korean? Do you consider them to be part of this society? What do you think about if they marry into Korean society? And the numbers were pretty shocking. I mean, they were 61% of, the article is written. Sometimes I really don't like the way these articles are written, but it says 61% of South Koreans don't view foreign workers as members of Korean society. It's 61% of the people surveyed. So it's really not a good. It all depends on where you surveyed. Like if you went into factories where these people are competing with these guys for their jobs and things along those lines, then of course they're gonna have like their own opinion about them coming into the country. And the people voiced opinions about them taking jobs from Koreans because they'll probably do work for cheaper. And people voiced opinions about them, bringing and say like diseases in the country or something, anything like that. But they voiced opinions about them, there being negative opinions about them marrying Korean women or Korean men. And so they really did have some surprising numbers that were they weren't anything nice, man. But xenophobia, I thought, was just because people look at a group of people that immigrate to Korea and find a path toward Korean citizenship, just because they feel in their mind that they're not Korean, I don't think that's xenophobia. I mean, they're not saying they shouldn't come over here. They're just saying like they come over here, but they aren't Korean. They came from somewhere else. And I think really, well, I won't say if you ask that. If in America, if somebody's an American citizen, usually U.S. people in America will say it's a U.S. citizen. But America is like known for being a hodgepodge of people coming from all different countries. I mean, Korea is it's a homogeneous society. Like there's very few. I mean, at this point, there's more foreigners in Korea than there's ever been, and it really ain't that many. It's like 3% of the population or something like that. So it's interesting to see how people will paint this, but really, I mean, now is there xenophobia in Korea? Absolutely. Like there's people who, I mean, I am in an international relationship. I'm married to a Korean national. Well, she's American now, but my wife is Korean. So when we walk around the street, we get two different responses. When it's just me and her, we get some pretty interesting looks, and I'll put it that way. But when it's me, her, and our son, then usually we get some pretty nice people. We run into a lot of pretty nice people. So it just kind of depends on what they assume, what their assumption is when they see you. And usually it's like lesser educated people that have a real problem, or people who are from the country where they don't run into that very often, that we have real problems with. Like it's like, anyway. So yeah, that's a thing. And I think this is I think the article, I think xenophobia is the wrong word, but maybe not. I mean, what do I know? I'm not a wordsmith. There's some pretty, it's hard to, Koreans are slower to accept people into the community and call them Koreans. But I also remember another study that asked Korean children if they thought their classmates who weren't of Korean descent were Korean, and I mean, they've been in Korea their whole lives. If they asked them if they were Korean, and Korean children were like, yeah, they're Korean. They speak Korean. They watch Korean shows. They eat Korean food. Like they have the Korean toshirak when we go to lunch. They're Korean, and so that was actually about 10 years ago, maybe 5 years ago. But you got different opinions of different sides. And this is a pretty interesting story. I work in a hospital, so when I see things like this, it catches my attention. It's a floating hospital set sail for 2018, and this is a boat with 18 staff members on it, doctors, nurses, fishery experts, and a government representative. This boat basically is a floating hospital, and it goes around the lower part of South Korea, that lower section of South Korea. There's a lot of islands out there. A lot of people who live on those islands don't have access to, they don't have access to, I don't know, good healthcare. I was going to say standardized healthcare, but I don't know what the standard is. But their healthcare facilities are below standard, so they need some outside help because they're kind of like in these small towns and cities out there on these islands. And what this boat does is it goes around down on those islands. It visits like 6 major cities and 29 minor cities. I don't know what a major city on a small island is down there. I mean, we're not talking Jeju. We're talking like these little island communities because there's just this plethora of islands at the bottom. So they actually go there and administer aid and kind of help these people out. And they've got like radiological capabilities on this boat. And it's been set in sail since like the 70s. It's awesome. They meet other fishermen that are on boats out in the sea down there. They kind of help them out. So it's a pretty cool thing that they do. I wonder if they need like an administrator. It sounds like if I didn't have a family and if I was single, I'd do this for 180 days because they're out there 180 days out of the year. I would do this for a year just for the experience because it's got to be a bananas thing to say like I lived on a boat for a year and we just traveled around helping people. That's awesome. It also sounds a little, it's an older boat. It also sounds a little dangerous because there's always, there's the stories of these older boats not being properly maintained. I would imagine that that isn't the case with this one since it's at sea for so long. But man, yeah, that sounds like a cool thing. It's cool that people are out there helping people out like that. So, okay, that's the end of the current events segment. So that we had a couple of more news stories that didn't make it in just because it's late. I'm going to jump on and do the social media segment on Facebook, on the Seoulweaver Facebook group. We're going to do that live tomorrow, and I'll readdress some of these stories or kind of close out some of these stories and touch on some of those stories that didn't make it into the story, or it didn't make it into the broadcast today. I do want to touch on one more thing. Hold on. This is kind of random. There's a Marilyn Monroe statue in Gangwon like, if you knew where Gangwon was, I guess it's out near Wonju. And the story behind it is they said, oh, she came here back in X amount of years, 1958 or something like that, to entertain the U.S. troops that are stationed in Wonju. I used to be stationed in Wonju. And there was like not much out there when I was stationed there. I imagine it was even less in 1958 or whatever year it said. But she like just came there once. And like what they did what's the name of the city? Inji? And so what they did in Inji is they dedicated this statue to her, and they put it like right by the UN memorial where all the flags of all the countries that fought in the Korean War are. And they put a statue of her like in the middle. That's like the most random thing. I mean, I couldn't imagine how random it would feel to run into a statue of Marilyn Monroe out in the middle of this small town in Korea. And the justification sounds a little crazy. So it actually stirred controversy because people were like, they wasted money on this. They should have put something else there. And I tend to agree. I mean, Marilyn Monroe's a national treasure in the United States, but this is Korea. Why would they put Marilyn Monroe there? They couldn't think of any. If you couldn't think of anything else, then you need to spend the money on creating something from your town to make your town known to put there, because that's a little random. Sometimes when things like this happen, it's like, oh nah, you gotta keep it KO, man. You gotta do something for you, for your country, for your area. There's gotta be something that better represents this city than Marilyn Monroe. Yeah. That's all I had for this. So yeah, tomorrow, social media event. So we're gonna go do the social media segment. I'm gonna see if I can get my co-host to come back. We'll jump on there. We're gonna do that on Facebook Live. We're gonna record it and then post that on YouTube later, as well as all these, as well as this video. These two videos, they're gonna post on YouTube a little bit later, and I'll go through and edit them, and I don't know, do something to make it to try to chop it down and make it a little more digestible. So I thank you so much for your time. I'm gonna get out of here. It is late. It's 11 o'clock. That's not too late, but I gotta crash because I gotta get up early, hit the gym. Hope you guys enjoyed the show. Let me know what you think in the comments. Follow me on social media on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at Seoulweaver on all of those. It's the Seoulweaver's Facebook group with an S. If you want to join us there, join us tomorrow. And I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks so much. You guys have a good night.